Good afternoon, I'm Katie Wilson and you are watching A News. Let's see the headlines. The US will lift sanctions on Syria in a major policy shift. President Trump arrives in Qatar for the second leg of his Middle East trip. The EU imposes more sanctions on Russia while also considering tariffs on Ukrainian imports. US President Donald Trump says all sanctions on Syria will be lifted. The move follows his talks with Saudi and Turkish leaders on Tuesday and comes ahead of his meeting with Syria's president on Wednesday.
All American sanctions on Syria will be lifted. That's what US President Donald Trump announced after his discussions with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Riyadh on Tuesday. Both nations had urged Washington to ease restrictions on Damascus.
And I'm very pleased to announce that Secretary Marco Rubio will be meeting with the new Syrian foreign minister in Turkey later this week. And very importantly, after discussing the situation in Syria with the Crown Prince, your Crown Prince, and also with President Erdogan of Turkey, who called me the other day and asked for a very similar thing, among others, and friends of mine, people that I have a lot of respect for in the Middle East, I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness.
The decision marks a sharp shift in US foreign policy. The sanctions, first imposed under Bashar al-Assad, had isolated Syria from the international financial system and blocked investment critical for post-war recovery. The United Nations welcomed the move. A spokesperson says lifting sanctions could help rebuild Syria's economy and restore access to humanitarian aid after more than a decade of war and underinvestment.
To see relief on sanctions on Syria, to help the reconstruction of Syria, to help the Syrian people recover from more than a decade of conflict, a decade of underinvestment, and we continue to support the reconstruction, whether it's physical or psychological, of Syria, for it to be a country where all Syrians of all faiths, of all ethnicities and minorities feel safe and represented.
The move was also hailed by the Middle East Program, an American think tank based in Washington.
There's a humanitarian reason to want the sanctions to be lifted, which is that the people of Syria have suffered under the sanctions. They've suffered from natural disasters in the past few years. There was an earthquake not very long ago, and levels of poverty are extremely high. One of the biggest industries is the drug trade. One of the biggest industries is the drug trade in Captagon, which isn't good either. So if you want Syria to be able to make it as a country and not fall apart into a renewed civil war, it makes sense that you would want sanctions to be lifted and to have a chance to work with Syria's leaders to try to bring that about.
However, Kalanick also cautioned that while lifting sanctions could offer short-term relief, the United States should remain careful when engaging with Syria's new leadership. She warned that despite the changes, the situation remains volatile, and there are no guarantees about the future stability of the current regime.
President of Turkey Recep Tayyip Erdogan joined a high-level meeting online with President Trump, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara, calling for a stable Syria and pledging support against ISIS. Erdogan said Turkey wants a stable Syria that cooperates with its neighbours. He pledged support against ISIS and helped with ISIS prisons. Erdogan called Trump's lifting of sanctions on Syria of historic importance, and he also urged an end to violence in Gaza, stressing Turkey's support for the Palestinians. Damascus is celebrating after President Trump announced the lifting of sanctions on Syria. The move signals a major policy shift as Washington looks to re-engage with Damascus's new leadership.
Jubilant crowds flooded the streets of Damascus on Tuesday after US President Donald Trump announced the lifting of sanctions on Syria, a major policy shift that sparked celebrations across the country. Fireworks lit up the sky and residents waved flags in celebration.
To be honest, it's something joyful. We are very happy. I live outside Syria, so I'm especially pleased with this decision. As you can see, everyone is happy. Thank God. May it be for the good of the country.
I thank Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, King Salman, and all the Saudi people for this moment of chivalry. Their support has been with us from the day we began the revolution until now. A million thanks.
It is a very positive step if this really happens, and we hope for the best because the people are truly tired and the conditions have been difficult in the past period. We hope for the best.
We have been waiting for this for many years. It feels like a mountain has been lifted off our chest because now people may live more freely. I expect living conditions to improve in the future. It won't be immediate, but it will take some time. I believe this time has become a bit shorter. Congratulations to all of us.
The announcement comes as Trump is expected to meet President al-Sharaa in Riyadh on Wednesday, signalling a potential end to Syria's years-long isolation.
Well, joining us live from Lisbon to discuss the latest developments is Leonio Paulo Ferrer, Deputy Editor-in-Chief at Diario de Noticias. Thank you for joining us. Now, what does this lifting of sanctions tell us about the current geopolitical landscape?
Well, it proves that Donald Trump is a major game changer. Look, till recently, Syria was the enemy of the US. And even after the fall of the Assad regime, the new leadership have some serious problems with the US. Just remember that al-Sharaa fought the Americans in Iraq some years ago and was even imprisoned by the Americans. Then, for me, it's really, in a certain way, surprising. It's a major boost to al-Sharaa. It's the proof that Donald Trump plays by his own rules, and they want to be a game changer. Obviously, there is also some influence from the Saudi prince and the Turkish president in this move, but obviously it's a decision by Trump and shows that the Americans want to play a role in the Middle East and they want to create new rules. Look, for me, was really surprised not only the lifting of the sanctions, that is a good news for the Syrian people, but also the idea from Donald Trump that Syria could join the Abraham Accords. That, for me, was really a big surprise.
So I want to stick with this and discuss more about Israel. Have we had any reaction from Netanyahu in regards to this announcement, and what can we expect the feeling to be in Tel Aviv about this?
If you look historically to the relation between the close relation between Israel and the US, I think this move is previously known by the Israelis. Anyway, if you look to the Israeli foreign policy towards Syria after the fall of Assad, obviously the fall of Assad was good news for Israel. It was a long-time enemy of Israel. Assad Syria was a strong supporter of the Palestinian movement. But even being happy with the fall of the Assad regime, Israel was concerned with the new regime in Damascus. I remember that Israel constantly is bombing military facilities in Syria, and even is trying to support, in a certain way, the Druze minorities against some Islamist groups. In terms of Israel, I think that they are obviously they are pragmatic. We know there are some contacts, disparate contacts between Israel and the Syrian authorities, but probably about some minor issues about border security. I think Israel is trying to look at the developments. I think Israel will keep the pressure on Syria. And obviously, if we look to the support of the Israeli to the Druze, in a certain way, Israel is trying to play a role in Syria's future. I'm not sure about the goals. As you know, Israel controls Golan, that officially is still a Syrian territory, and we know that Israeli troops are in the buffer zone between Golan and the Syrian territory. Then probably we have to wait to understand exactly what is the reaction from Israel. But obviously, I don't believe that anyone in Israel is really believing that Syria will create official ties with Israel in the near future.
Yeah, it's all really major developments, isn't it? Thank you so much for joining us. Now, President Trump has arrived in Qatar as part of his Gulf tour, with major investment and defence deals on the agenda. Trump was welcomed in Doha by Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. Qatar is expected to unveil major investment plans in the US, including a potential aircraft deal with Boeing. Trump's regional trip began with a $600 billion in Saudi investment pledges and major arms sales. Next, he heads to Abu Dhabi, and Trump has also raised the possibility of joining talks between Russia and Ukraine in Turkey. The Kremlin has condemned French President Emmanuel Macron's suggestion to deploy nuclear-armed warplanes in Europe, warning it would not enhance the continent's security. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that Russia, the US and European nuclear powers must do more to build a strategic security framework in Europe. He noted that the current system is in a poor and worsening state due to what he says are obvious reasons. North Korean leader Kim Jongun supervised a firing drill and tactical training by military special forces, according to state media. As well as observing the drills, he met with military officials and soldiers. It's reported that Kim said the most vital task is the completion of war preparations. During a visit to the Russian embassy in Pyongyang last week, Kim stated that North Korea would not hesitate to authorize the use of military force if the United States persists in what he described as military provocations against Russia. In his first week as pontiff, Pope Leo XIV pledged to make every effort for peace and offered the Vatican services to mediate global conflicts. He spoke with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, offering to facilitate peace talks. Zelensky plans to attend the Pope's inauguration on May the 18th in St. Peter's Square, where he may hold meetings on the sidelines.
During an address to members of the Eastern Catholic churches, many hailing from conflict zones like Ukraine, Syria, Lebanon and Iraq, Pope Leo XIV emphasised the Vatican's readiness to facilitate dialogue.
The Holy See is always ready to help bring enemies together, face to face, to talk to one another, so that peoples everywhere may once more find hope and recover the dignity they deserve, the dignity of peace.
Pope Leo has made repeated calls for peace in the early days of his papacy. On Sunday, he called for an authentic and lasting peace in Ukraine, a ceasefire in Gaza, and the release of all Israeli hostages held by militant group Hamas. He also welcomed the fragile ceasefire between India and Pakistan. Pope Leo also warned against the rise of simplistic narratives that divide the world into good and evil, stating,
War is never inevitable. Weapons can and must be silenced, for they do not resolve problems, but only increase them. Those who make history are the peacemakers, not those who sow seeds of suffering.
La guerra non è mai.
Pope Leo XIV's early actions signal a strong commitment to peace and dialogue, positioning the Vatican as a potential mediator in some of the world's most pressing conflicts.
The European Union has agreed on a new round of sanctions against Russia, whilst also preparing to reintroduce tariffs on Ukrainian imports next month.
European Union ambassadors have reached agreement on the bloc's 17th package of sanctions against Russia during a meeting on Wednesday. According to Euronews, the measures blacklist nearly 200 vessels from Russia's so-called shadow fleet used to evade oil restrictions, along with 75 individuals and companies linked to Moscow's defense industry. The new package also bans the export of certain EU-made chemicals used in missile production, targets 30 companies accused of helping Russia bypass restrictions, and sanctions on more than 20 people and entities accused of spreading disinformation. The sanctions come as Western leaders, including Ukraine, France, Germany, Poland, and the UK, warn of further action if Russia refuses a proposed 30-day ceasefire. The Kremlin has not responded to the offer ahead of planned talks in Turkey on Thursday. At the same time, the European Union is preparing to end special trade measures for Ukraine. According to the Financial Times, Brussels plans to sharply reduce tariff-free quotas on Ukrainian exports starting next month, reversing the emergency trade deal introduced in 2022. That temporary agreement allowed most Ukrainian goods to enter the EU duty-free, helping Kyiv's economy during wartime. But the surge of low-cost grain, poultry and sugar triggered backlash across the bloc. Farmers in Poland, France and other countries accused Ukrainian imports of driving down local prices. 2 EU diplomats told the FT that the planned transitional measures will sharply cut annual quotas for Ukrainian maize, sugar and poultry. Ukrainian officials warn the changes could slash export revenue by 3.5 billion euros a year. Talks to update the broader EU-Ukraine free trade deal are still ongoing, but not expected to conclude before the 6th of June deadline.
The European Court of Justice has annulled the European Commission's decision to withhold exchanges between Pfizer's CEO and President Ursula von der Leyen. The case was brought by the New York Times as they sought to obtain messages relating to the procurement of COVID-19 vaccines. William Denslow reports from Brussels.
In its ruling, the European Court of Justice says the Commission had not given a plausible explanation to justify the non-possession of the requested documents. The New York Times had requested access to text messages between European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and Pfizer's CEO, dating back to 2021. The US newspaper argues the exchanges between January 2021 to May 2022 could offer insight into the EU's multi-billion euro procurement of COVID-19 vaccines from the pharmaceutical giant. The Commission had rejected the Times' request, saying President von der Leyen had not kept the messages. A lawsuit was subsequently filed in 2023, and Europe's second top court found the paper succeeded in rebutting the presumption of non-existence and of non-possession of the requested documents. In response to the ruling, the Commission says transparency has always been of paramount importance, and that it will adopt a new decision providing a more detailed explanation. In its ruling, the General Court added that the Commission now has a 2-month window should it wish to appeal the decision. William Denslow, A News, Brussels.
Tensions between India and Pakistan have once again drawn global attention, but this time it's not just the conflict making headlines. The reported use of Chinese weapons in the fighting is raising new questions about Beijing's growing military influence and what it could mean for global defence dynamics.
A recent military confrontation between Pakistan and India is prompting a global reassessment of Chinese-made weapons, traditionally viewed as less capable than Western arms. Reports suggest Pakistan used Chinese J-10C fighter jets to shoot down 5 Indian aircraft, including French-made Rafales. The news alone caused the Chinese manufacturer's market value to jump by over 55 billion yuan, more than $7.6 billion. The impact reaches far outside the region. Former Global Times editor Hu Xijin warned Taiwan should take notice, given Beijing's claims over the island. In Taipei, military analysts are closely tracking the developments. Xu Haxiao Huang of a defense think tank says China's air power may now rival US capabilities in East Asia, possibly pushing Washington to consider more advanced arms sales to Taiwan. Also drawing attention is China's PL-15 missile. reportedly recovered from the crash sites. Capable of speeds exceeding Mach 5, the missile's use in live combat boosts its credibility as a serious rival to Western weaponry. This could be a turning point for China's arms industry. Already the world's fourth largest exporter, China mainly sells to developing nations attracted by low prices and flexible terms. But with global defense spending rising, its combat-tested systems could appeal to countries seeking alternatives to Western suppliers. Analysts say this gives Beijing a stronger pitch, especially in the global south. Still, Beijing is pushing forward. President Xi Jinping aims to modernize the military by 2027 through greater integration of civilian and defense industries. Recent milestones include launching a massive amphibious assault ship and test flights of what's believed to be a sixth-generation fighter jet. While the J-10C may not represent a revolutionary leap, its reported combat performance signals real progress. For China, it's a chance to show its weapons can compete, not just in design, but in battle.
Armenia is reshaping its defence partnerships, signalling a major shift away from its longtime ally, Russia. Whilst military ties with Moscow weaken, Yerevan is strengthening strategic cooperation with India and France.
Between 2022 and 2023, Armenia signed defence contracts with India worth over $1.5 billion. During this period, Yerevan purchased 214mm Pinnaker multiple rocket launchers, 155mm ATAGS howitzers, ZDS anti-drone systems, Akash-1S air defense systems, Konkurs anti-tank missiles licensed from Russia, mortars, and various ammunition. A new shipment of Akash-NG medium-range air defense systems is expected soon. Another major defense partner is France. From 2023 to 2024, Armenia signed arms contracts worth approximately $250 million. The deals include 3 Groundmaster 200 radars, Mistral 3 portable air defense systems, and Caesar self-propelled artillery units. Armenia's last major deal with its CSTO ally Russia was signed in 2021 for $400 million, but it remains incomplete, according to the report. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute previously noted that Russia accounted for 94% of Armenia's arms imports between 2011 and 2020. However, by 2024, this share had dropped to 10%, according to Armenia's Security Council Secretary Armen Grigorian, who spoke on national television in early March. The drop in Russian arms supplies is linked to war-related delivery issues, according to the Russian International Affairs Council. Meanwhile, public opinion in Armenia has shifted. A 2023 IRI poll ranked Russia as the third biggest threat, after Azerbaijan and Turkey. As part of its foreign policy shift, the Armenian government adopted a strategy of diversifying partnerships and moving closer to the West. In January 2025, Armenia signed a strategic partnership charter with the United States, and just a month later, Parliament approved a bill to launch the EU accession process. Despite these political changes, Russia remains Armenia's key trade partner. According to Armenia's Statistical Committee, in 2024, Russia accounted for more than 41% of Armenia's trade turnover, totaling $12.4 billion, including $3.1 billion in Armenian exports. In 2023, that figure stood at 37% or $7.9 billion. Over 2022 to 2023, the volume of accumulated Russian investment doubled to $4 billion. However, much of the trade growth was due to re-exporting Western goods to Russia and Russian goods to global markets via Armenia, according to the Russian International Affairs Council. Political analyst Artur Atayev says Armenia had long planned military technical ties with India to diversify arms sources and reduce reliance on Russia. He adds that France also helps fill the gap, but notes Yerevan isn't seeking a full break with Moscow. For Russia, Armenia's arms market isn't a priority. Continued cooperation is more important for Armenia, he says. Stanislav Prichin, Senior research fellow from the Institute of World Economy and International Relations argues that Indian and French weapons can't yet replace Soviet-era systems and sees the shift as mainly political. New weapons haven't proven themselves. Russian gear still needs maintenance and parts, and Armenia follows CSTO standards. The Russian base in Gyumri is still key, he explains. He adds that Armenia has become a transit hub for Russian trade, but warns that lifting sanctions or cutting off bypass routes could shrink trade volumes back to pre-2020 levels.
Armenian armed forces intermittently opened fire on Azerbaijani army positions. That's according to a statement from Azerbaijan's Ministry of Defence. The shots were fired between 9:15 and 9:30 in the evening using small arms. So far, Armenia has not issued a statement on the incident. The skies over central Turkey are buzzing as the multinational search and rescue exercise Anatolian Phoenix 2025 kicks off in the city of Konya. Among the participants are Azerbaijani military personnel working alongside forces from across the globe. The drills, organised by Turkey's Ministry of National Defence, are designed to sharpen operational skills and build stronger ties in humanitarian missions.
Military forces from 10 nations are taking part in an international search and rescue exercise in Turkey. The Anatolian Phoenix 2025 is underway in Konya, enhancing coordination in humanitarian search and rescue operations. Hosted by the Turkish Ministry of National Defense, the drills will feature forces and aircraft from the United States, Germany, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Italy, Qatar, Romania, Slovakia and Saudi Arabia, each contributing to complex simulated rescue scenarios in challenging environments. Azerbaijan is also participating with a contingent of Air Force personnel, including pilots, support crew and Su-25 attack aircraft. Anatolian Phoenix 2025 tests the tactical readiness of each country's forces and also strengthens the coordination between nations essential in real-life crisis response. From disaster zones to conflict areas, this joint training is a rehearsal for rapid, coordinated action. The drills will build trust, share expertise, and enhance the global community's ability to respond swiftly and effectively when disaster strikes. The exercise will continue until the 23rd of May.
President Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff predicts that countries like Lebanon, Syria, Libya, Azerbaijan and Armenia could soon join the Abraham Accords. He cited positive reactions and progress towards resolving conflicts in these nations. Witkoff expressed confidence that more countries could join the Abraham Accords in the coming months. He said this would reflect President Trump's commitment to advancing peace and stability in the region. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan said his country wants closer ties with the European Union during talks with the Director General for Neighbourhood and Enlargement negotiations of the European Commission. That's according to Armenian media. The parties discussed the current stage of Armenia-EU relations, including the implementation of the Comprehensive and Enhanced Partnership Agreement. Talks also covered economic and sectoral cooperation, green energy, infrastructure development and democratic reforms. They also discussed the normalization process between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze has addressed President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, expressing concern over what he calls the absence of high-level communication in a series of unfriendly legislative moves in Washington. The Prime Minister appeals for a strategic reset, urging Washington to reaffirm its support for Georgia's sovereignty and democratic trajectory. Well, Georgia's parliamentary speaker said that his country remains committed to pursuing EU membership. Speaking at a conference in Budapest, he criticised the EU's views on reforms in Georgia. Our correspondent Nini Nikolaishvili has more.
In Budapest, Georgian Parliament Speaker Shalva Paplashvili delivered a direct rebuke to the European Union, accusing it of interfering in Georgia's internal affairs and undermining democratic principles. Speaking at the conference of the speakers of parliaments of the EU member and partner countries, Papashvili criticized EU's demands for a foreign-led vetting system for Georgian judges. He called this the violation of national sovereignty and claimed that no EU country would accept such external control over its judiciary. In his words, the centralized EU structure sometimes imposes terms that it would not accept itself. Papashvili went further, accusing certain EU political groups of helping former President Mikhail Saakashvili and its allies to return to power, an effort that Papashvili calls the blatant interference. The speaker also condemned the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, whose resolution in January led the Georgian parliament members to withdraw from the assembly. He said that this move shows the disrespect to people's democratic choice and confirmed the pattern of political pressure under the guise of European values. Papashvili's central message is that Georgia remains committed to the European integration, but on its own sovereign terms, not with dictated ones. It's Nini Nikolaishvili reporting from Tbilisi, A-News.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A-News.